decade, the Brown family made Off the Grid look like a lifestyle brand. Discovery's Alaskan Bush People turned Billy and Ami Brown's 7 children into household names, selling millions of viewers on the idea that this self-described wolf pack could handle absolutely anything the wilderness threw at them. Audiences watched them chop firewood in brutal cold, build cabins by hand, and go months at a stretch without seeing another human being outside their immediate family. It was billed as a portrait of a family that had chosen isolation and self-sufficiency over modern convenience. And for a long time, that framing held up. But the toughest chapters of the Brown family story didn't happen on camera in the Alaskan bush. They happened afterward in courtrooms, hospitals, and, most recently, along the banks of a river in Washington state. Once the show stopped filming new episodes, the family's life didn't quiet down. If anything, the years since have brought some of the most serious hardships they've ever faced, from criminal charges to devastating health emergencies to losses that no amount of wilderness training could have prepared them for. This is a look at the Alaskan Bush People cast members who have died or landed behind bars, along with the family conflicts and health battles that shaped the years after the cameras went dark. Stick around, because the final story on this list is the one that changed everything for the Browns. Billy Brown wasn't just a cast member. He was the entire premise of the show. Born in Texas in 1952, Billy lost his parents and his sister in a plane crash when he was a teenager, a tragedy that set him on a path away from conventional life. And together the couple raised 7 children in remote parts of Alaska, building the survivalist lifestyle that Discovery turned into a hit series starting in 2014. Billy's health had been a quiet storyline running underneath the show for years. Cameras captured a severe seizure episode back in 2018, and his sons often described the unpredictability of his condition. Some seizures were mild enough that he could power through them, while others left him unconscious. Then, in March 2019, Billy collapsed while trying to leave the family's camper, gasping for breath. He underwent a lengthy surgery in which doctors drained a significant amount of fluid from one of his lungs, and further testing revealed that his breathing problems weren't rooted in his lungs at all. They were being caused by a weakening heart. Physicians reportedly urged him to stop living at high elevation, warning that the altitude was putting real strain on his failing health. But Billy refused to leave the land he loved, reportedly telling his family he'd rather die on his own property than anywhere else. His children tried to compromise by moving his trailer to a lower part of the mountain while he recovered from surgery. Billy also had his own run-ins with the law well before the fraud case that later ensnared several of his children. Decades earlier, in 1980, he faced a horse theft charge, an early sign of the legal turbulence that would occasionally follow the family even after they became reality TV stars. In 2021, Billy died at 68 after suffering a seizure at the family's Washington property. His son Bear announced the news publicly, describing his father as a best friend and a loving husband and grandfather. Discovery Channel released its own statement mourning him as a trailblazer and one of a kind. Billy's death came in the middle of filming season 13, and the show built an entire tribute episode around his memory a few weeks later, revisiting his sense of adventure and his devotion to the wolf pack he'd built. His passing didn't just end an era for the family. It reshaped the entire direction of the series, which pivoted from wilderness survival to a family trying to figure out who they were without the man who'd built their entire way of life. In the months that followed, his estate also became entangled in a $500,000 breach of contract lawsuit from one of Billy's former business partners, adding a legal complication to an already painful period for the family. Long before his father's death, Billy's second oldest son, Joshua, better known by his nickname, Bam Bam, found himself facing real legal consequences alongside his dad. Alaska state prosecutors alleged that between 2010 and 2013, the Browns had falsely claimed Alaska residency in order to collect permanent fund dividend payments, while the family was actually living elsewhere. Billy, Ami, and 4 of their children were originally hit with dozens of counts covering unsworn falsification and theft. Billy and Bam Bam each pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor count of second-degree unsworn falsification as part of a negotiated deal that dropped the remaining charges against the rest of the family. A Juneau judge sentenced both men to 180 days in jail with a bulk of that time suspended, leaving each of them to serve 30 days. Billy also had to repay thousands of dollars in improperly claimed dividends and pay a fine. Bam Bam owed a smaller amount along with community service. At sentencing, Bam Bam expressed regret and said he had learned from the experience. Since then, Bam Bam has mostly stepped out of the spotlight. He's built a private life with his partner, Allison Kagan, whom he met through the show, and their relationship reportedly contributed to some friction with the rest of the family. In 2020, he was involved in a serious car accident in Washington state after another driver crossed into his lane. Investigators determined he wasn't at fault. Compared to several of his siblings, Bam Bam has kept the lowest public profile of any Brown child since leaving the series. Bear Brown, full name Solomon Isaiah Freedom Brown, was always the most outsized personality on the show, embracing a self-styled reputation as an adrenaline-chasing king of extreme. Off-camera, his personal life has been far messier than his TV persona suggested. 22, Bear was arrested near his Washington home and charged with fourth-degree domestic violence assault involving his then-partner, Raven Adams. According to the police report, an argument over a phone escalated, and Bear was accused of pushing Raven down during the confrontation. She reported minor scratches. Deputies found no evidence of strangulation, and no drugs or alcohol were involved. Bear spent the weekend in Okanagan County Jail before being released without bond, and he ultimately accepted a plea deal the following month. Bear and Raven's relationship had been rocky for years before that arrest. They got engaged in 2019, split 2 weeks later, then announced Raven's pregnancy the day after the breakup. Their son River was born in 2020, and the two eventually reconciled and married in January 2022, just months before Bear's arrest. The couple went on to have 2 more children before separating again in 2025, describing the split as mutual and centered on co-parenting their 3 kids. Raven later entered a relationship with a woman named Caitlin Webb, and in February 2026 the two announced their engagement. Bear has publicly supported Raven's new relationship, saying the two of them have settled into a workable co-parenting rhythm and that Raven regularly makes the long drive so their children can spend time with him. Was only 11 when the show premiered, making her the family's youngest cast member and, for years, one of its most sympathetic. She married Josiah Lorton in January 2025, and just a few months later, in April 2025, the newlyweds were arrested in Okanagan County, Washington, on charges of first-degree burglary and first-degree malicious mischief. Rain was additionally charged with second-degree criminal trespass. Both were released from Okanagan County Jail on their own recognizance after a few days behind bars, and they later pleaded not guilty to the charges. Follow-up reporting alleged that the case centered on a break-in at a rental property connected to Josiah's family, with claims that well over $100,000 in cash, firearms, wine, and gold coins had gone missing. Rain pushed back publicly, telling followers on Instagram that a former manager had actually stolen tens of thousands of dollars from her and mistreated her, and asking fans to wait to hear her side of events before judging her. As of the most recent updates, the case remains in the court system. The arrest didn't happen in isolation. It landed in the middle of an already tense period for Rain within her own family, which brings the story to one of the most bitter feuds the Browns have dealt with since the show ended. Noah Brown built a reputation on the show as the family's self-taught inventor, once helping design a running water system for their off-grid property. In his personal life, though, 2024 and 2025 brought a wave of conflict that split the family down middle. Noah and his then-wife, Rain, filed for a protective order against Rain, alleging a pattern of threats stretching back years, including claims that Rain had talked about wanting a family member dead and had referenced access to a firearm during an argument over a sick horse. A court denied that petition in September 2024, ruling that the claims lacked sufficient detail and were too far removed in time. Tensions boiled over again in April 2025, when Noah contacted police requesting a welfare check on Rain and their mother, Ami, alleging that both were using methamphetamine supplied by Rain's husband and that Rain was interfering with Ami's medication. Rain was arrested days later on the burglary charges described above. In June 2025, Rain publicly accused Noah of having sexually abused her as a child, allegations Noah has firmly denied, calling them false and saying he believes his sister is trying to damage his relationship with his own children. Remarkably, the two siblings crossed paths by chance in early 2026 and appear to have begun reconciling, with Rain reportedly inviting Noah to be present when she gives birth to her first child later this year. Separately, Noah's marriage to Rain ended. The two announced their split in January 2025, and Rain filed for divorce later that year. But her medical history has been one of the most serious ongoing storylines connected to the family. In 2017, doctors diagnosed her with stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer and gave her a survival outlook that was almost unthinkably low. She underwent months of chemotherapy and radiation at UCLA, lost a dramatic amount of weight during treatment, and the family relocated from Alaska to Washington State partly to be closer to her medical care. Against the odds, she was declared cancer-free, though she has needed regular scans ever since to watch for recurrence. In February 2025, Ami was hospitalized again after being airlifted to a larger facility with breathing difficulties that turned out to be pneumonia. She spent time in intensive care before recovering enough to be released, and family members reported by that spring that her scans continued to come back clear. Her health has remained a recurring source of anxiety for the family in the years since Billy's death, especially given how central she's remained to the property the Browns still call home. Snowbird Bird Brown, one of the original cast members, went through her own health crisis during the filming of Season 14 in 2022. After days of dismissing severe abdominal pain, she eventually collapsed and was rushed for medical scans, which revealed 2 large tumors on her ovaries. Surgeons removed masses weighing several pounds combined. While the tumors were not cancerous, doctors warned that there was a real chance of cancer developing if similar growths returned and recommended a hysterectomy